Korean Mafia boss finds a dying black woman on the street. What he does next shocks everyone. Kang Jae-min hadn't planned to stop. It was after midnight in Seoul's old industrial quarter. The kind of place where broken streetlights flicker like dying stars, and even desperate people know better than to linger. The air smelled of rain, rust, and secrets best left buried. He walked alone, no bodyguards, no driver, no entourage. Just Kang Jae-min, coat buttoned high against the cold, moving through the shadows. He needed this. The silence. The space. Then he heard it. Shallow. Vet. Failing. A breath that shouldn't exist in a place like this. Jaemin stopped, his body going rigid. Every nerve in his body, every instinct honed through years of survival, screamed the same warning. Keep walking. This part of Seoul devoured kindness. And men like him, men who ruled from the shadows, didn't survive by getting involved in other people's problems. But the sound came again. Weaker this time. Desperate. His feet moved before his mind could stop them. He turned toward the source, and that's when he saw her. Before we continue, pause for just a second. Where are you watching from? And what time is it there? And if stories where power collides with humanity move you, hit that subscribe button, smash the like and share this. Because what happens next will change everything you think you know about justice. Slumped against a brick wall, half in shadow, half in the dying glow of a flickering street lamp, was a black woman dressed in dark clothes completely soaked with blood. A thin red line ran from her temple, down her cheek, to her jaw. Her chest rose and fell unevenly, too shallow, too weak. One hand clutched her side as if trying to physically hold herself together. She was dying. Jaemin's jaw clenched. He should walk away. Should pretend he never saw this. People died in this district all time. It wasn't his problem. Wasn't his responsibility. Getting involved meant questions. Attention. The kind of scrutiny that could unravel everything he'd built through blood and calculated violence. But something about the way she looked, so broken, so abandoned, made him hesitate. Kang Jae-min had built his empire on one unbreakable rule. Never touch anything that could bring unwanted attention. No witnesses. No complications. No emotional mistakes. It was how he stayed out of prison. How he kept his operations untouchable. How he protected his people from the law and rival families alike. But as he stared at the dying woman, her blood pooling on the concrete like spilled ink, something inside him shifted. He moved closer. Knelt beside her. The smell hit him immediately, metallic, sharp, the smell of someone who didn't have much time left. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first. Then they locked onto him, and fear flashed across her face. Even half dead, she saw what he was. The tattoos curling up his neck like black flames. The expensive suit that screamed power and danger. The cold calculation in his eyes. Don't, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Please. I'm not here to hurt you, Jaemin said quietly, though even he didn't fully understand why it mattered what she thought of him. Her breath rattled. Blood bubbled at the corner of her lips. You don't know who you're helping, she gasped, each word clearly causing her pain. They'll come back. Who will? Jaemin demanded, his voice sharp. Her head tilted weakly toward him. Her eyes already starting to lose focus. Everyone. Jaemin scanned the alley. No cameras. He'd made sure of that years ago when he took control of this district. No witnesses. No sirens in the distance. Whoever had done this to her thought she was already dead. They'd left her here to become just another body in a place where bodies didn't ask questions. He should have walked away. Should have called it in anonymously and disappeared before anyone arrived. Simple. Clean. Smart. But instead, Jaemin slipped an arm under her shoulders. She was lighter than she should have been, her body already giving up. That realization, that she'd been starving or running or both, angered him more than the blood. You're not dying tonight, he said, his voice like steel. She laughed weakly, the sound wet and broken. Everyone says that. I'm not everyone. He lifted her carefully, cradling her against his chest. Her head lolled against his shoulder, her breathing getting more shallow with each passing second. As Jaemin carried her into the darkness, away from the streetlight and the place where someone had tried to erase her, he realized something. He'd just broken his most important rule. And he had absolutely no idea what consequences were coming. Kang Jae-min was not having a good day. The kind of day where everything that could go wrong did. 2 shipments intercepted by rivals. A territorial dispute with the Busan family heating up. His second-in-command questioning his decisions about expanding into the ports. And to top it all off, a splitting headache that felt like his skull was about to crack open. He needed air. Space. A moment away from the constant weight of being the man everyone feared and depended on in equal measure. So he'd done something he rarely did. Walked alone through his territory at midnight, hands deep in his coat pockets, letting the cold soul air clear his mind. He never expected to find someone dying in his own district. And he certainly never expected to care. But now, carrying a bloodied stranger through the empty streets, Jae-min found his mind racing through calculations. He couldn't take her to a hospital. Too many questions. Too much attention from police who'd love nothing more than to catch him in something they could actually prove. But he knew someone. A doctor who owed him. Who didn't ask questions. Who could keep her alive long enough to get answers. Because Jae-min needed answers. In his world, people didn't just end up dying in his district by accident. Someone had ordered this. Someone with power. Someone who thought they could operate in his territory without consequences. And that, more than anything else, was a mistake. The safe house wasn't on any map. From the outside, it looked like every other abandoned warehouse in the district. Rusted metal doors, broken windows covered with plywood, graffiti layered across brick walls like scars from forgotten wars. But Jae-min knew better. He kicked the door open, still carrying the dying woman in his arms. Her breathing had become even weaker, barely there. Her skin felt like ice against his chest. Inside, the contrast was immediate. Sterile white walls. Surgical lights. Medical equipment that belonged in a hospital, not a black market operation hidden in Seoul's industrial wasteland. Dr. Han was already there, summoned by a single text message that asked no questions. He was in his 50s, gray-haired, with steady hands and the kind of face that had seen too much to be shocked by anything. But even he paused when he saw the blood. "Mr. Kong," Han said carefully, his medical bag already in hand. "This is..." "She's dying," Jae-min interrupted, his voice flat. "Fix her. Now." Han looked at the woman's pale face, the blood soaking through her clothes, the shallow rise and fall of her chest. He'd been paying off his debt to Jae-min for 3 years. A gambling problem that would have gotten him killed if Kong hadn't intervened. He knew better than to argue. "Get her on the table," Han commanded, snapping into professional mode. Jae-min laid her down under the harsh surgical lights. The damage became brutally clear. Deep bruising across her ribs. A gash near her kidney that had narrowly missed killing her instantly. Internal bleeding that painted her skin in shades of purple and black. Han cut away her blood-soaked clothing, exposing the full extent of the violence. "Broken ribs. Punctured lung. She needs surgery immediately, and even then," he paused, meeting Jae-min's eyes. "Survival isn't guaranteed." "Then make it guaranteed," Jae-min said coldly. "Mr. Kong, if she dies here..." "She won't." It wasn't a request. It was an order backed by the kind of authority that had built an empire. Han didn't waste time arguing. He inserted IVs, hooked up monitors, prepared surgical instruments with practiced precision. The machines hummed to life, tracking a heartbeat that was far too weak. Jae-min stood back watching. In the corner of the room, his reflection stared back at him from a darkened window. He barely recognized the man looking back. Survival over sentiment. That had been his philosophy for 15 years. The rule that kept him alive when everyone around him fell. His father had died because he trusted the wrong person. His mentor had died because he showed mercy to a rival. Jae-min had learned early. Attachment was a liability. Compassion was a weapon your enemies used against you. So why was he standing here, watching a stranger fight for her life, instead of walking away? He didn't have an answer. Hours crawled by. Han worked in focused silence, his hands moving inside her body, repairing what brutal fists and perhaps something worse had destroyed. Blood. Sutures. The mechanical beep of machines monitoring a life that refused to let go. Finally, as dawn light began creeping through the cracks in the warehouse walls, Han stepped back. Exhausted. Blood on his gloves. She'll live, he said quietly. But she'll wake up with questions. So will I, Jaemin replied. She opened her eyes 6 hours later. The first thing she did was try to sit up. The scream that followed was raw, animal. Pain ripping through broken ribs and surgical wounds. Easy, Jaemin said from the chair beside the medical table. You're alive. That's what matters. Her eyes focused on him slowly. Recognition dawned, followed immediately by fear. She tried to pull away, but her body wouldn't cooperate. Where? Her voice cracked. Where am I? Somewhere safe, Jaemin said. Safer than that alley at least. She stared at him, her breathing shallow and panicked. You're Korean. He almost smiled. Very observant. Why? The word came out desperate, confused. Why save me? Jaemin leaned forward, his eyes dark and unreadable. Because whoever did this to you wanted you erased. Silenced. And I don't like people who think they can decide who lives and dies. Her jaw tightened, pain flashing across her face. You don't even know me. No, he agreed. But I know my city. And I know that people don't end up dying in my district by accident. Something shifted in her expression. Fear gave way to something harder. Understanding, perhaps. Or resignation. My name is Nia Okafor, she said finally, each word clearly causing her pain. And you're right. About what? She met his eyes, and for the first time he saw not just a victim, but someone who had been fighting long before that alley. This wasn't random. The words hung in the sterile air like a confession. Like a warning. And Kang Jaemin realized that saving her life might have been the easy part. Now came the consequences. Tell me, Jaemin said, his voice cutting through the sterile silence. Everything. Nia shifted on the medical table, wincing as pain radiated through her broken ribs. Her eyes were sharp despite the morphine, calculating despite the vulnerability. I'm a community organizer, she said, each word deliberate. I came to Seoul 3 years ago. Started working with immigrant families, black communities, low-income neighborhoods that this city pretends don't exist. That doesn't explain the blood, Jaemin said flatly. No. She laughed bitterly, then gasped at the pain it caused. That came later, when I started fighting the Songdo Heights redevelopment project. Jaemin's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Nia continued, her voice growing stronger despite her body's weakness. They're planning to demolish 12 city blocks. Immigrant-owned businesses. Black churches. Affordable housing complexes. Entire communities that have been there for decades. Development happens, Jaemin said. This is a city. Things change. Not like this. Fire entered her voice. I found documents. Environmental reports they buried. That land, those 12 blocks, they're contaminated. Industrial chemicals from the factories that used to be there. Carcinogens in the soil. The groundwater is poisoned. She paused, letting the weight of it settle. They know, she whispered. The developers. The politicians backing them. They all know. But instead of cleaning it up, they're hiding it. Fake safety reports. Bribes to inspectors. They're going to build residential towers on poisoned ground and sell apartments to families who'll never know they're being slowly killed. Jaemin stood perfectly still, his mind processing implications that went far beyond one woman's crusade. I spent 18 months gathering proof, Nia continued. Shell companies laundering money. Politicians on the payroll. Corporate executives signing off on falsified documents. I was going to expose everything. Jaemin repeated. They found out. Her voice cracked. 2 weeks ago, someone leaked that I had the documents. Then came the threats. Phone calls. Anonymous messages. They told me to stop digging or disappear. You didn't stop. No. She met his eyes, defiant even now. So 3 nights ago they made the choice for me. 2 men. Profesionals. They didn't want information. They wanted me dead. Beat me until I couldn't fight back, then left me in that alley to bleed out. They assumed you'd be another statistic, Jaemin said quietly. Another outsider who vanished in the night. Exactly. Nia's jaw tightened. And when my body was found, If it was found, the story would die with me. No documents. No witness. No problem. Jamin turned away, his back rigid. His mind was racing through territory maps, business arrangements, power structures he thought he controlled. Where exactly is this project? He asked, though he already suspected the answer. 12 blocks in the old industrial quarter, Nia said. Starting at Chongyecheon Street and... I know where that is. His voice was ice. Because that was his territory. Land he controlled. Streets where nothing moved without his approval. Someone had greenlit a massive redevelopment project. Corruption, poison, corporate money. In his district, and he'd never been consulted. The implications hit him like a physical blow. Nia watched him carefully, reading the shift in his posture. You didn't know, she said, not a question but a realization. You control this territory and you didn't know. No. The word was sharp, dangerous. Then maybe you're not as powerful as everyone thinks, she said, her voice edged with something between accusation and disappointment. Or maybe you're part of it. Maybe saving me was just. Jamin turned so fast she flinched. If I was part of it, you'd already be dead. Then why? Because someone moved on my territory without permission, he said, his voice deadly calm. Someone thought they could operate in my city, displace my people, poison my land, and I wouldn't notice. Or worse, they assumed I wouldn't care. Nia stared at him, recalibrating everything she thought she understood. Your people? This isn't about justice. This is about territory. Territory is justice in my world. Jamin shot back. Every family I protect, every business that pays me for safety, every street where people can walk without fear. That's because I control what happens there. Someone betrayed that. Went behind my back. Made deals with corporations and politicians who think money buys them anything. He stepped closer, his eyes burning with cold fury. They used my district, my authority, my silence. And they tried to kill you to keep that secret. Nia's breathing quickened. So what now? You kill them and move on? Protect your empire? No. Jamin's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a promise. Now I make them understand something they forgot. What? His eyes were black diamonds, hard and unbreakable. That whoever did this, whoever thought they could operate in my territory, silence witnesses in my district, profit from poison in my city, made one critical mistake. What mistake? Jamin's expression was the coldest thing Nia had ever seen. They acted like they owned this city. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. And Nia realized that saving her life wasn't mercy. It was the opening move in a war. For 3 days, Nia Okafor remained in the safe house under guard. Not a prisoner exactly, but not free either. 2 of Jamin's men stood outside the door at all times. Silent. Watchful. The kind of men who killed without hesitation, and asked questions never. Nia hated it. Hated the confinement. Hated the dependence. Most of all, hated that she owed her life to a man who represented everything she'd spent years fighting against. On the 4th day, Jamin returned. He brought food, real food, not the bland medical meals Dr. Han had prescribed. Jajangmyeon from a street vendor 3 blocks away. The smell filled the sterile room with something almost human. You didn't have to, Nia said, eyeing the container suspiciously. You need strength, Jamin replied, setting it on the table beside her. Anger only gets you so far. Speaking from experience? Always. She ate slowly, each movement still causing pain. He watched in silence, reading her the way he read everyone. Calculating weakness, measuring threat, assessing value. You know what you are, Nia said finally, her voice sharp. You extort businesses. Profit from fear. Probably traffic God knows what through this district. And now I'm supposed to trust you. No, Jamin said calmly. You're supposed to stay alive long enough to destroy the people who tried to kill you. And you get what? Territory back? Control? Maybe. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Or maybe I just don't like being played for a fool. Before Nia could respond, the door opened. A man entered, sharp suit, cold eyes, the kind of presence that commanded rooms. Park Minjun, Jamin's second in command. Boss, Minjun said, his voice tight. We need to talk. Now. Jaemin followed him outside. Through the thin walls, Nia heard everything. She's a liability, Minjun hissed. A community organizer who fights people like us. The longer she stays, the more dangerous this gets. Then she stays dangerous, Jaemin replied. Boss, think about this. The cops will be looking. Her people will be asking questions. Every day she's here is another day we're exposed. I've made my decision. Then let me handle it. Minjun's voice dropped lower, colder. Quick. Clean. No one has to know. The silence that followed made Nia's heart race. Then Jaemin spoke, his voice like winter frost. Touch her and you'll answer to me. Personally. Minjun said nothing for a long moment. Then, yes, boss. When Jaemin returned, Nia was sitting up straighter despite the pain. Your man wants me dead, she said flatly. Most of my men want most people dead, Jaemin replied. That's why I give the orders. And what are your orders? To find out who's behind Songdo Heights. Every name. Every dollar. Every lie. He pulled out a tablet, set it on the table between them. Financial records. Corporate documents. Screenshots of emails that shouldn't exist outside encrypted servers. How did you? Nia started. I have resources you don't, Jaemin said. And unlike you, I don't need warrants or legal permissions to access information. Nia leaned forward, ignoring the sharp pain in her ribs. Her eyes scanned the documents, and what she saw made her breath catch. Shell companies registered in the Cayman Islands. Money flowing through Singapore banks. A web of corporations so complex it would take forensic accountants months to untangle. Except Jaemin had done it in 3 days. Hanseong Development Group, she whispered, reading. They're the primary developer. But look, her finger traced connections across the screen. These subsidiaries. They're all owned by the same holding company, Daehan Capital Holdings. And Daehan Capital is owned by, Jaemin prompted. Nia scrolled further. Her face went pale. City Councilman Lee Sung-ho. He's on the Urban Planning Committee. He approved the environmental permits. He approved permits for a project he secretly owns, Jaemin said, while falsifying reports about soil contamination. This is bigger than I thought. Nia's hands trembled slightly. These aren't just corrupt officials. This is systematic fraud at every level. Now look at this. Jaemin swiped to another document. Bribe payments disguised as consulting fees. 50 million won to an environmental inspector. 20 million to a safety auditor. Payments stretching back 18 months. Nia stared at the evidence accumulating before her. You're not just muscle, she said quietly, realization dawning. No. You actually understand how systems work. How corruption flows. How power protects itself. I built my empire studying exactly that, Jaemin said. The difference between me and them? I'm honest about what I am. Nia looked up at him, something shifting in her expression. Not trust, not yet. But recognition. Understanding. They're going to cover this up, she said. Even with evidence. They have too much invested. Too much to lose. Then we don't let them cover it up. How? I can't exactly hold a press conference from your safe house. Jaemin's eyes glinted with something dangerous. You won't have to. Truth doesn't need speeches. It just needs the right audience at the right time. What are you planning? Something they won't see coming. Before Nia could press further, Jaemin's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. His expression went completely neutral, which Nia had learned meant something was very wrong. What? She asked. Word just leaked to the Songdo Heights investors, he said quietly. What word? Jaemin looked at her, his eyes dark and calculating. That you're alive. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. And Nia realized that saving her life had just put a target on everyone in this building. The panic spread like fire through dry grass. Within hours of the leak, Jaemin's surveillance network picked up the chaos. Encrypted phone calls between corporate executives. Emergency meetings at midnight in private clubs. Politicians scrambling like rats abandoning a sinking ship. They're erasing everything, Minjun reported. standing in the safe house command room where monitors displayed intercepted communications. Emails wiped. Hard drives destroyed. 3 people connected to Songdo Heights have already left the country. Jaemin watched the screens with cold calculation. Cowards run. But the smart ones stay and fight. Councilman Lee hasn't run, Minjun confirmed. Neither has Kim Tae-sung from Hanseong Development. They're consolidating. Planning something. Let them plan. Jaemin pulled up another feed, surveillance cameras around the safe house perimeter. What about our location? 3 suspicious vehicles in the past 6 hours. Different plates, same pattern. Circling the industrial district. Looking. They don't know exactly where we are, Jaemin said. But they're narrowing the search. On the screen. A black sedan passed the same intersection for the 3rd time. Professional. Patient. Dangerous. Nia appeared in the doorway, moving slowly but steady. She'd insisted on leaving the medical room despite Dr. Han's protests. They're hunting me, she said, not a question. They're hunting a ghost, Jaemin replied. Someone who's supposed to be dead. That makes them desperate. Good. Her voice was steel. Desperate people make mistakes. Minjun looked between them, his jaw tight. Boss, we need to move her. Somewhere secure until this blows over. It won't blow over, Nia said sharply. They won't stop until I'm actually dead or discredited. Running just delays the inevitable. Then what do you suggest? Minjun asked, his tone barely concealing contempt. Exposure. Nia moved closer to the monitors, studying the faces of men who tried to kill her. Public. Undeniable. Make it impossible to silence me without proving everything I'm saying is true. That's suicide, Minjun said flatly. That's the only play that works, Nia countered. You said it yourself, they're erasing evidence. In a week, we'll have nothing. In a month, I'll be just another conspiracy theorist with wild accusations and no proof. Jaemin remained silent, his mind working through scenarios, calculating odds, measuring risks. Boss, Minjun pressed. This isn't our way. We handle problems quietly. 1 bullet, 1 body, problem solved. Why risk exposure? Because bullets don't expose corruption, Jaemin said quietly. They just prove we're exactly what they say we are. Minjun stared at him. Since when do you care what they say? Since they operated in my territory without permission. Jaemin's voice dropped to something dangerous. Killing Lee and Kim would satisfy my anger. But it wouldn't stop the project. Someone else would step in. The money would flow elsewhere. The poison would still be buried under homes and schools. He turned to face both of them. We're doing this differently. How? Nia asked. Jaemin's expression was unreadable. A press conference. Public. Live-streamed. With every major media outlet in Seoul watching. The room went silent. You're insane, Minjun breathed. You haven't appeared in public in 5 years. Every law enforcement agency in this country wants you behind bars. The moment you show your face. They'll watch, Jaemin interrupted. Everyone will watch. Because a mafia boss doesn't hold press conferences. Which means whatever I'm about to say must be important enough to risk everything. Nia studied him carefully. You do that? Actually put yourself out there? I'm not the story, Jaemin said. You are. I'm just the reason people will pay attention. Over the next 72 hours, the safe house transformed into a war room. Jaemin's people worked around the clock. Verification teams cross-checked every document, every transaction, every piece of evidence. Legal experts, the kind who worked in shadows but understood courtroom strategy, prepared presentation materials that could withstand scrutiny. Media contacts were approached carefully. Not the corporate-owned networks that would bury the story, but independent journalists hungry for truth. Foreign press that couldn't be intimidated by local threats. Security planning consumed entire whiteboards. Entry routes. Exit strategies. Protective formation. Jaemin knew the moment he appeared in public, multiple forces would try to stop him. Nia watched it all with growing amazement. This wasn't a criminal operation, it was a military campaign. You've done this before, she said one night, finding Jaemin alone, reviewing floor plans of the press venue. Not exactly this, he admitted. But power moves always follow the same patterns. Control the narrative. Choose the battlefield. Strike when they're unprepared. They'll try to kill you, Nia said quietly. The moment you're exposed, every agency in Korea will come after you. Probably. So why risk it? Jaemin looked up at her, and for the first time, something almost human flickered in his eyes. Because some ghosts refuse to stay buried, he said. And maybe it's time people saw what really haunts this city. The next morning, news broke across Seoul. An emergency press conference had been announced. Location, Seoul Press Center. Time, 2 p.m. Subject, undisclosed. The invitation came from an anonymous source, but carried enough weight that every major outlet cleared their schedules. No names were given. No preview provided. Just a single line at the bottom of the announcement that made the entire city hold its breath. Regarding the Songdo Heights development project and crimes committed in its name. Within minutes, government phones were ringing. Corporate lawyers were mobilizing. And somewhere in a safe house that no longer felt safe enough, Nia Okafor and Kang Jaemin prepared for war. Not with bullets. With truth. The Seoul Press Center was packed wall to wall. Journalists from every major outlet crowded the hall. Cameras lined the back row like soldiers at attention. Foreign correspondents stood shoulder to shoulder with local reporters, all sensing that something unprecedented was about to happen. In the front rows sat the uncomfortable ones. City officials who'd been encouraged to attend. Corporate representatives sweating despite the air conditioning. Men in expensive suits whose lawyers had advised against coming but whose curiosity, or fear, had won out. Councilman Lee Sung-ho sat 3 rows back, his face a mask of controlled calm. But his hands gripped the armrests too tightly. Beside him, Kim Tae-sung from Hanseong Development checked his phone obsessively, watching for the signal that never came. The stage was simple. A podium. Microphones. Behind it, a massive screen currently blank. At exactly 2 p.m., the lights dimmed. The crowd hushed. A side door opened. And Nia Okafor walked onto the stage. The reaction was immediate. Gasps rippled through the hall like shockwaves. Cameras erupted in a cacophony of clicking shutters. Reporters lunged forward, shouting questions that dissolved into chaos. Because Nia Okafor was dead. Everyone knew it. She'd disappeared 2 weeks ago. No body had been found, but activists don't just vanish in Seoul without consequences. The unspoken understanding was that she'd been silenced permanently. Yet here she stood. Alive. Bandaged. Moving slowly but deliberately to the podium. In the third row, Lee Sung-ho's face drained of all color. Nia gripped the podium, steadying herself. Her voice, when she spoke, was clear despite the pain still radiating through her ribs. My name is Nia Okafor. 2 weeks ago, I was attacked in the industrial quarter and left to die in an alley. The men who beat me thought I was dead. They were supposed to be right. Silence descended like a hammer. I was targeted because I discovered the truth about the Songdo Heights development project. A project that will displace 12 city blocks of families, immigrant communities, Black-owned businesses, low-income housing, to build luxury apartments on land that is poisoned. The screen behind her lit up. Satellite imagery of the proposed site. Red zones indicating contamination levels. Industrial chemicals. Carcinogens. Heavy metals in the soil and groundwater. The developers know. The politicians know. And instead of cleaning it up, they falsified safety reports and bribed inspectors to hide the truth. More images appeared. Documents with official seals. Email exchanges. Bank transactions. Each one damning. These shell companies. Nia pointed to the screen where corporate structures flowered like toxic blooms. All lead back to the same people. City Councilman Lee Sung-ho, who sits on the urban planning committee that approved the permits. Kim Tae-sung from Hanseong Development, who signed off on fake environmental assessments. And dozens more who profited from burying evidence that could save lives. Lee Sung-ho stood abruptly, his lawyer grabbing his arm. This is slander. We will sue. With what evidence? Nia's voice cut through his protest like a blade. The evidence you destroyed? The emails you wiped? The inspectors you paid 50 million won to look the other way? The room exploded. Journalists surged forward. Cameras swiveled to capture Lee's face, rage and fear warring for dominance. Nia continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. They tried to kill me because I wouldn't stop asking questions. Because I refused to let families be poisoned for profit. Because I was inconvenient to people who think money and power mean they can erase anyone who stands in their way. She paused, letting the weight of it settle over the room. I am a black woman organizing in a country that isn't mine. I am an outsider fighting systems designed to ignore people like me. And they assumed, they gambled, that my death wouldn't matter. That no one would care enough to investigate. That I was disposable. Her voice cracked, just slightly. Raw emotion bleeding through the controlled fury. But I'm standing here today because one person decided I wasn't disposable. That my life, and the lives of the families facing displacement, were worth more than profit and power. The side door opened again, and Kang Jaemin walked onto the stage. If Nia's appearance had caused gasps, Jaemin's entrance created absolute pandemonium. Reporters screamed questions. Security moved instinctively toward the stage. Police officers in the back radioed for backup. Because Kang Jaemin hadn't been seen in public for 5 years. He was a ghost. A legend. The most wanted criminal in Seoul. And now he stood under bright lights, facing cameras broadcasting to the entire nation. He stepped to the microphone beside Nia, his presence commanding instant silence. I am not here as a hero, Jaemin said, his voice cold and clear. I have no illusions about what I am or what I've done. But I will not tolerate thieves pretending to be saviors in my city. He gestured to the screen, where more documents appeared. Financial records that only someone with his resources could have obtained. I funded this investigation. Not because I'm a good man, but because the Songdo Heights project operates on territory I control. Approved without my knowledge, profiting from corruption I did not sanction. These men, he looked directly at Lee and Kim, thought they could operate in my district without consequences. His eyes were black ice. They were wrong. The hall erupted again. But beneath the chaos, something else was happening. Police officers were moving through the crowd. Not toward the stage, toward the seats where officials sat frozen. Handcuffs clicked onto Lee Sung-ho's wrists. Kim Tae-sung tried to run and was tackled by 2 officers. Throughout the hall, men in expensive suits were being detained. Arrested in real time as evidence flashed across the screen behind Nia and Jaemin. Because this wasn't just a press conference. It was an execution. Not with bullets, with truth witnessed by an entire city. As officers led Lee past the stage, he looked up at Jaemin with pure hatred. You'll regret this, he hissed. They'll lock you up. Everything you've built will survive, Jaemin interrupted quietly. The question is whether you will. Cameras captured everything. The arrests. The evidence. The woman who refused to die and the man who made sure everyone knew why. And Seoul would never be the same. The city erupted. Within hours, the press conference footage went viral. Not just in Seoul, globally. A dying activist and a mafia boss exposing corruption live on camera, while police made arrests in real time. It was unprecedented. Unthinkable. Undeniable. By nightfall, 3 more city councilors had resigned. By morning, 7 corporate executives were in custody. Hanseong Development's stock crashed 38% before trading was halted. Banks froze assets connected to shell companies. Prosecutors who'd been too busy to investigate suddenly discovered new enthusiasm for their jobs. The Songdo Heights project was dead. Jaemin watched it unfold from a different safe house. This one deeper in territory he controlled absolutely. Monitors displayed news coverage from every channel. Each one showed the same images. Nia's face. His face. Lee Sung-goin handcuffs. Documents damning enough to end careers. The Justice Ministry raided Daehan Capital Holdings an hour ago. Minjun reported, his voice tight. They're seizing everything. Files. Computers. Bank records going back 5 years. Good, Jaemin said quietly. Boss. Minjun turned from the screens. You understand what this means? Every law enforcement agency in Korea now knows exactly what you look like. Where you operate. They'll come after you harder than ever. I know. Then why? Because it had to be done. Jaemin's voice carried finality that ended discussion. Outside, Seoul's streets told two different stories. In wealthy Gangnam, corporate lawyers burned midnight oil, scrambling to distance clients from the scandal. Investors panicked. Shareholders demanded explanations. The comfortable world of power brokers who'd operated above consequences suddenly found themselves drowning in scrutiny. But in the industrial quarter, in immigrant neighborhoods, in the 12 blocks that had been scheduled for demolition, celebration, families who'd received eviction notices tore them up. Small business owners who'd been offered pennies for their properties refused to move. Community organizers who'd fought for years without success suddenly had ammunition. The government couldn't ignore them anymore. Not with the whole world watching. Nia stood on a rooftop in the heart of the district, watching people gather in the streets below. Music played from open windows. Children ran freely for the first time in months. Their parents no longer afraid of surveyors marking their homes for destruction. "They're calling you a hero," Jaemin said, appearing beside her. She didn't turn. "I'm not." "Neither am I. But it doesn't matter what we are. It matters what they needed us to be." Nia finally looked at him, her expression unreadable. Was this justice? Or was this just you eliminating competition? The question hung between them like a knife. Jaemin was silent for a long moment. Then both. "At least you're honest. I told you from the beginning. I'm not a good man. I saved you because someone operated in my territory without permission. Everything that followed was about restoring control." "And the families?" Nia pressed. "The people celebrating down there? Were they just collateral benefit to your power play?" "Maybe." Jaemin's eyes were cold in the streetlight. "Or maybe some battles align. Your justice. My vengeance. The result is the same. Corrupt men in prison, families safe in their homes." "The result is not the same," Nia said sharply. "Intent matters. Motivation matters." "Does it? To those families?" He gestured to the streets below. "Do they care why I helped, or just that their homes are saved?" Nia had no answer for that. "This will cost you," she said finally. "Your empire. Your operations. Every agency will target you now." "Yes." Jaemin's expression didn't change. "Half my business relied on officials looking the other way. Cops I paid. Inspectors I bribed. Many of them are now under investigation because of evidence I provided. You're destroying your own protection. I'm accepting consequences." He turned to face her fully. "The difference between me and Lee Sung-ho? I knew this would hurt me and did it anyway." He thought he was untouchable. "And now I adapt. Rebuild. Find new ways to survive." Something almost like respect flickered in his eyes. "Same as you." Before Nia could respond, Minjun appeared on the rooftop, his face tense. "Boss, we have a problem." Jaemin's posture shifted instantly. "What kind?" "The arrests. The resignations. The raids." Minjun's voice dropped. "They're all mid-level. Important, yes. But not the top." "Meaning?" "Meaning someone higher ordered the Songdo Heights project. Someone with enough power to insulate themselves completely. Lee and Kim were taking orders from above." Jaemin's jaw tightened. "Who?" "We don't know. The financial trail goes cold at a holding company registered in Luxembourg. Owned by another company in Dubai. It's layers we can't penetrate without." Minjun hesitated. "Without what?" "Without access to international banking records that even you can't reach." Nia stepped forward. "What are you saying? That whoever's really behind this is still untouched?" "Not untouched," Minjun corrected. "Protected. By enough money and power that national borders become shields." The celebration sounds from the street below suddenly felt fragile. Temporary. Jaemin stared out at the city, his city, and realized something that made his blood run cold. They'd won a battle. But the war had just revealed itself to be far larger than anyone suspected. "Find them," he said quietly. "I don't care how deep we have to dig. Someone gave the order. Someone profited from poisoning my territory. And someone is still sitting comfortably, thinking they escaped consequences." Minjun nodded and disappeared. Nia looked at Jaemin, seeing something new in his expression. Not anger. Not vengeance. Purpose. This isn't over, she said. No. Jaemin's voice was steel-wrapped in silk. It's just beginning. And somewhere, in an office far from Seoul, someone very powerful watched the news coverage with calculating eyes. Watched arrests and celebrations. Watched a mafia boss and an activist standing together. And made a single phone call that would change everything. The attack came 3 weeks after the press conference. Professional. Surgical. 2 men with silenced weapons who'd bypassed security Jaemin thought was impenetrable. They made it within 30 meters of the safe house where Nia was staying before Minjun's counter-surveillance caught them. The firefight lasted less than 2 minutes. Both attackers died. One of Jaemin's men took a bullet to the shoulder, but survived. When Jaemin arrived, the bodies were already being removed. He stood in the alley where it happened, staring at blood that wasn't Nia's, and felt something shift inside him. International contractors, Minjun reported, handing him a phone they'd recovered. Hired through encrypted channels. Paid in cryptocurrency. No direct connection to anyone we arrested. But someone sent them, Jaemin said quietly. Someone with reach beyond what we exposed. Minjun's voice was grim. Someone who still wants her dead. Jaemin looked at the blood pooling on concrete. The second time in a month someone had tried to erase Nia Okafor. The second time they'd failed. Double the security, he ordered. And send a message to every fixer, every contractor, every shadow operator in Asia. Anyone who takes a contract on her answers to me personally. Boss, that's declaring war on. I know what it is. Jaemin's voice was ice. Do it. Over the following days, Jaemin systematically dismantled what remained of the corrupt networks. Not violently. He'd learned from Nia that violence only created martyrs. Instead, he leaked information. Financial records that hadn't made the initial press conference. Names of cops who'd looked the other way for years. Politicians who'd profited from a dozen different schemes, not just Songdo Heights. Each revelation was precise. Surgical. Damning. One by one, the old alliances crumbled. Officials who'd protected his operations suddenly had their own investigations to worry about. Corrupt cops who'd taken his money found themselves reassigned or suspended. The infrastructure that had kept him safe for years collapsed under the weight of its own rot. Minjun watched it happen with growing alarm. You're destroying everything, he said one night. Every connection. Every protection. Boss, without these people we're exposed. Vulnerable. Good. Jaemin replied, his eyes on the city lights beyond the window. We relied on corruption too long. Let's see what survives when we stand on our own. What if nothing survives? Jaemin was silent for a long time. Then maybe that's what we deserve. Nia found him on that same rooftop where they talked weeks ago. The city stretched below them. Transformed but familiar. Scars still visible but healing. I heard about the attack, she said, standing beside him at the edge. You were the target, Jaemin replied. Not surprising. You could have let them try. Saved yourself the trouble of protecting me. No. The word was absolute. I couldn't. They stood in silence, 2 people who'd collided accidentally and changed each other irrevocably. What happens now? Nia asked finally. You tell me. You're the one with the vision for justice. I'm leaving Seoul, she said. The story's out. Other people are fighting now. I've done what I came to do. Jaemin nodded slowly, unsurprised. Where will you go? Wherever people need someone willing to dig for truth. She paused. What about you? I'm stepping back, he said quietly. Nia looked at him sharply. From what? Control. Power. The empire I built. He gestured to the district below. Minyoon thinks I'm destroying everything. Maybe I am. But after exposing corrupt officials for personal gain, I can't keep being exactly what I condemned. Can monsters change? Nia's voice was soft, not mocking. I don't know. Jaemin's honesty was raw. Maybe they just become different kinds of monsters. Or maybe they step aside and let better people lead. You saved my life. You saved thousands of families. That counts for something. Does it? I did it for territory. For pride. Because someone challenged my authority. He looked at her. If Lee had asked permission first, would I have stopped him? Or would I have taken my cut and looked away? Nia had no answer. That's what haunts me, Jaemin continued. Not what I did, but what I might have done if circumstances were different. Intent matters, Nia said, echoing their earlier argument. You told me it doesn't. But maybe you were wrong. Maybe. He almost smiled. Or maybe I'm just tired of being the man everyone fears. So what? You disappear? Retire? Pretend 15 years of blood don't follow you? No. I accept that they do. Jaemin's voice was steel beneath silk. But I can choose what comes next. I can stop expanding. Stop corrupting. Stop being the reason people need to fear the night. That's not redemption, Nia said carefully. I know. Redemption requires absolution I don't deserve. He met her eyes. But it might be enough to stop making things worse. The city hummed below them. Sirens in the distance. Life continuing despite everything that had changed. I leave tomorrow, Nia said. Dawn flight. Jaemin nodded. Then we should say goodbye now. Is that what this is? Goodbye? What else would it be? Nia studied him. This man who'd saved her, exposed corruption alongside her, and now planned to fade into something quieter than legend. A promise, she said finally, that if the world needs a monster to fight monsters again, I know where to find one. Something flickered in Jaemin's eyes. Not quite hope, not quite peace, but acceptance. One last meeting, he said. Tomorrow. Before you leave. Why? Because some endings deserve to be witnessed. And beneath the soul night sky, a dying woman and the man who refused to let her die stood together one more time. Knowing that tomorrow, everything would change again. Dawn broke over Seoul in shades of amber and gray. The city had changed. Not overnight. Transformation never worked that way. But slowly, visibly, in ways that would take years to fully understand. The 12 blocks scheduled for demolition stood intact. Families still lived in apartments that had been marked for destruction. Small businesses remained open. Immigrant-owned restaurants, black churches, community centers that served as lifelines for people the city had tried to forget. But the change was imperfect. New politicians replaced the arrested ones. Some were genuinely committed to reform. Others were simply better at hiding their corruption. Corporate developers eyed different neighborhoods, learning from mistakes, crafting more sophisticated schemes. The battle had been won. The war continued. Nia stood at the edge of the industrial quarter one last time, watching the sunrise paint the buildings gold. Her bags were already at the airport. Her flight left in 3 hours. She'd spent the night walking through streets she'd fought to save, talking to families who thanked her, visiting the alley where she'd nearly died. Now just another alley, empty and ordinary, the bloodstains long since washed away by rain. You came, Jaemin said, appearing beside her as silently as he had that first night. You asked me to. They stood together, two people who should never have been allies, watching the city wake. Do you think it mattered? Nia asked. Everything we did. The exposure. The arrests. Does any of it actually change anything? Some things changed, Jaemin replied. Families are still in their homes. That matters. But for how long? Until the next developer? The next corrupt official? Maybe. His voice was quiet. Or maybe some of those families will fight now. Because they saw that resistance is possible. That power isn't absolute. That even monsters can choose differently. Nia looked at him. Is that what you are? A monster who chose differently? I'm a man who profited from fear and violence for 15 years, Jaemin said. One act of exposure doesn't erase that. It just means I finally understood something. What? That silence is the real crime. He gestured to the city. Every official who knew about the poison land and said nothing. Every inspector who took bribes and filed false reports. Every politician who profited while families suffered. They weren't killers, they were silent. And silence enabled everything. You were silent too, Nia said. For years. About corruption you benefited from. Yes. No defensivnis. No excuses. That's why I know exactly how it works. Why I know that breaking silence, even once, can matter more than a lifetime of quietly doing harm. The sun climbed higher. Traffic began flowing through streets. The city coming alive with all its beauty and brutality intact. What will you do? Nia asked. After I'm gone? Survive, Jamin said. Rebuild. Probably make mistakes. He almost smiled. Try to be less terrible than I was. That's a low bar. I'm aware. Nia turned to face him fully. Thank you. For saving my life. For fighting beside me. For choosing truth over self-preservation. Thank you for reminding me that power doesn't define morality, Jamin replied. That the strongest thing someone can do is refuse to be silenced. They stood in silence for a moment. A moment that held everything unsaid. Respect. Recognition. The understanding that they'd changed each other in ways neither fully comprehended. If circumstances were different, Nia began. They aren't, Jamin interrupted gently. You fight for justice. I manage violence. Those paths don't align. Not permanently. But they aligned once. Yes. And maybe that's enough. Nia's phone buzzed. Her flight reminder. Time to leave the city that had nearly killed her, and had ultimately given her the biggest victory of her life. Goodbye, Kang Jae-min. Goodbye, Nia Okafor. She walked away. Didn't look back. Disappeared into the morning crowd the way activists do. Quietly, purposefully, already moving toward the next fight. Jamin watched her go. Then turned and walked in the opposite direction. Alone again. By choice this time. No bodyguards. No entourage. Just a man walking through territory he controlled, past neighborhoods he'd helped save. Beneath a sky that held both judgment and possibility. The city continued around him. Imperfect. Complicated. Still capable of both terrible cruelty and unexpected grace. And somewhere in that complexity, perhaps there was space for monsters to become something less monstrous. For the silence to find their voices. For justice to emerge from the most unlikely places. Weeks later, the story spread beyond Seoul. Not just in Korea, internationally. The activist who survived. The mafia boss who exposed corruption. The city that turned on its masters when finally forced to look at the truth. It became a case study. A conscionaritate. A strange, imperfect example of what happens when power collides with conscience. And in cities around the world, people ask themselves the same question. If you were in her place, dying in an alley, surrounded by darkness, would you have trusted the man everyone feared? Or would you have chosen silence to survive? The answer, like all important answers, depended entirely on what kind of person you chose to be. If stories where power meets humanity move you, where the line between hero and villain blurs in service of something larger, subscribe and share. Because the world needs more people willing to break silence, no matter what it costs. The question is, will you be one of them?